Good evening, good evening, good evening, everyone. And welcome to the special session of your Unified Government of Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas Commission meeting. Today is November 30th, 2023. Before I call this meeting to order, I want to announce that we have individuals attending remotely as well as on site. All participants joining by phone should please mute your phones when not speaking to avoid any background noise. During the meeting, please make sure that you announce yourself by name and title every time you speak so the public that is participating knows exactly who is speaking. This is critical given the number of remote participants and its current guidance from the Kansas Attorney General's office. I'd like to also note that when you do speak, please make sure that you speak clearly into the microphone at an audible level where you can be heard. Yes, and make sure your green light is on. Thank you, Commissioner Markley. And make sure that you talk loud enough so that your comments can be heard by all those that are within sight and sound, and that there can be an accurate record of your comments. And welcome, everyone. I'll now call this meeting to order. Clerk, a roll call, please. And could you announce the meeting as well?
Thank you. Good evening. You're hereby notified that I have called a special session of the Unified Government of Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas, to be conducted in a hybrid format on Thursday, November 30th, 2023 at 5 p.m. for a special session hosting the state delegation to discuss state legislative agenda in the fifth floor conference room of the Municipal Office Building, 701 North 7th, Kansas City, Kansas. Roll call. Bynum. Here. Burrows.
Here.
Townsend, we have an absence memo. McKiernan, we have an absence memo. Ramirez.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Kane. Markley. Here. Stites. Davis.
Here.
Larner.
Here. Thank you, Clerk. Tonight is a special session, and I'd like to welcome all our members from our state delegation of the Wyandotte County, our representatives who are here to join us this evening. So hopefully have a good, robust discussion about things most important to our residents of Wyandotte County, as well as items of concern and consideration and recommendations from a Unified Government Commission and staff. We're very pleased again to have our delegation join us. And this is a real important discussion. And so I'm excited to get this off. We know a lot happens in Topeka, and those decisions that happen in Topeka have a huge impact on Wyandotte County. We're very appreciative of our delegation being here to make sure that the things that we know they're going to be working on diligently on behalf of the great people that call Wyandotte County home. We'll have the full input necessary for them to make informed decisions and really advocate in a way that aligns with the needs of Wyandotte County. We're joined also here by our lobbyist, Mr. Paul Davis. But before I turn it over to Paul Davis, I'd like to recognize our county administrator, David Johnson, and ask him to open up the meeting.
Well, as we embark toward another legislative session at the state level, we do appreciate the opportunity to talk to our elected officials of our state delegation to talk about what we see are our priorities. So you hear from us, issues that you see that you will be facing during the upcoming session, and know that we're here to help you out. So thank you again for participating in our discussion this evening, and I'll now turn it over to our lobbyist, Paul.
Thank you very much. And what I think might be helpful just before we begin is just to have the members of the legislative delegation introduce themselves. I know that you probably know most of them, but we are on camera here, and for folks who are tuning in, just want to know who's here. So maybe Representative Curtis could start.
So hello, everybody. I'm Representative Pam Curtis, and I serve the 32nd District, which is basically downtown Kansas City, Kansas, and the surrounding area up to I-635.
Hi, I'm Lynn Melton. I represent District 36, which is out west to 7 Highway.
Representative Mike Thompson, represent from Bonner Springs going east to Edwardsville, Muncie, Turner, clear to 635.
Senator Petty.
Senator Pat Petty, Sixth District, and so I'll just say it's almost half of Kansas City, Kansas and Wyandotte County.
Thanks for having us. This is Senator Jeff Pittman, Senate District 5. I cover in Wyandotte, the western part of Wyandotte, extending up from the Legends and basically encompassing Wyandotte Lake and west.
Good evening, Representative Valdina Nguyen, 34th District. It is a neat little slice down the middle of the city from 2nd to essentially about 75th state to Georgia. And I'm also the honor to serve as the Assistant Minority Leader. Thank you.
Thank you and for having us this evening. I'm House Representative Melissa Orpeza. I represent District 37, which includes Armadale, 1 Street in Argentine, a portion of Turner, and then all the way out State Avenue to about 94th Street.
Very good. Representative Reese wanted me to just let you know that he was sorry he cannot be here. He is attending a conference right now, and I spoke with Senator Haley last night. He is also at a conference right now and is unable to attend. He did want me to convey his strong opinions about the vacant property registry, which I'm sure members of the delegation are well aware of. But I told him I would mention that. I also want to just acknowledge Mark Corson is here with the Northern Flyer Alliance, and hopefully you all have the handouts that he has passed out. They have a major issue that they're going to be coming to the legislature with, and just make sure that if you haven't had an opportunity to talk with Mark, you definitely should. Just a couple of comments, then I'm going to turn it over to Alan. You know, this coming session is going to be probably dominated by discussions about taxes. Lots of legislative sessions are, but I think this one will be more significant because of the very good fiscal situation that the state is in, affording the opportunity for legislature to enact tax cuts and also look at some spending enhancements in certain areas, which they've been able to do over the past couple of years. Last year, there was a major issue with a single tax rate bill that passed both the House and the Senate, was ultimately vetoed by the governor, and effort to override that veto failed by just 1 vote. That bill will undoubtedly be back. There are also a variety of other tax proposals that I'm sure the governor will be announcing in her State of the State address. There's been a lot of discussion, as the delegation is well aware of, about property taxes. And obviously Wyandotte Countyans are very tuned in to that issue. And the legislature is going to be debating a variety of proposals about property tax relief in one way or shape or form or the other. And I know that the members of the delegation will probably talk about that here in just a little bit. The governor has been making a very strong push on Medicaid expansion. If you haven't seen, she has literally been all over the state campaigning for Medicaid expansion. Republican legislative leadership has indicated that is a non-starter, I think, with them. But the governor is going to keep pushing that discussion, and I'm sure members of the legislature who are interested in that will be as well. The Medicaid contracts are currently being rebid. There was some legislation last year that dealt with that issue, and there could possibly be some legislation this year. The bidding process is currently undergoing, and I think the Department of Health and Environment is looking to make an award sometime in March this year. There are certainly a number of issues regarding education that are going to be debated. The governor's main push is for a full funding of special education. That certainly is an issue that helps just about every school district out there. But those efforts in the past have been tied to proposals for vouchers or school choice type programs that the governor has been opposed to, and whether those issues are going to be linked again or will be separated, we'll have to see. But with that said, there's a whole lot of other issues that I know members of the delegation probably want to talk about, and I don't want to take up too much time about that. But we really, I know, relish the opportunity to have this dialogue so that we can get the delegations input as the commission adopts an agenda at the next meeting, and would just invite members of the delegation to please, you've had an opportunity to review the draft agenda that we put together, which really is a product of departments throughout the UG, and Alan's going to talk about that in just a second here. But we want to have the best product that we possibly can, and we've been trying to make that a little shorter and try to prioritize those things. Senator Pittman gave a thumbs up there. But we really appreciate the opportunity to get your input here this evening. So with that, I will turn things over to Alan.
All right, thank you, Paul. So as just a reminder for the commission, the legislative agenda will come back for adoption on December 7th. So there are any adjustments or updates made after this evening will come back for adoption. As Paul noted, the delegation has requested that there be a tighter agenda, if you will. So you'll see on the left-hand side on page 1, there's items that are identified potentially as priorities. We want to make sure that the commission is in alignment with priorities, most of which have carried over from last year. But as we go through this, if you want to make your own notations in terms of what you think are or are not priorities, we can get that information back. And so that when we come back on December 7th, we can also help to provide the delegation with that information about what those priorities are. As with last year, there are also a number of other items that are more, kind of the workings of government type of items that do remain in the legislative agenda. So we didn't want to lose those while also surfacing those items that are higher priority. Most of the items, as you'll see in here, with a handful of exceptions, are ones that carried over from the 2023 agenda. So there's not a whole lot of new content in here, but we'll kind of run through these as we go. They are, identified sort of left to right as the title, the description, and what general category they are, whether it's a legislative item or an appropriation related item, whether it was included in that 2023 UG legislative agenda, and then what related departments would be within the UG would be related to that item. That's kind of the structure of it. Any questions on that before we jump right in? Okay. Item number 1, this was the top priority last year, which was Medicaid expansion, as Paul talked about. I'll also mention that there may be an additional resolution specific to Medicaid expansion in support of Medicaid expansion that could be on the mayor's agenda on December 7th as well. Again, as part of this broader effort to identify and coalesce support for that, so that you may see that on December 7th as well. But I wanted to, that's again number 1 in the legislative agenda from last year, and any discussion on that item. All right. Second one, protect state infrastructure funding. Again, this was in last year's legislative agenda and relates to the needs for infrastructure. Representative Curtis will be speaking to that at the 7 o'clock meeting. There's no shortage of infrastructure needs that have been identified through the work of the infrastructure subcommittee. Commissioner Ramirez and others have worked on. That state funding is an important part of that continued effort to meet those infrastructure needs. We number 3 here, allow flexibility on revenue sources. This is another one that was in last year's agenda and perhaps takes even more salience with conversations around LAVTR and there's other ones around protecting the ability of local governments to manage their own revenues and not have those revenue sources cut off in ways that inhibit the ability of local government to meet the needs of the residents.
Go ahead. Sorry, is that Commissioner Renee?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the allow for flexibility of revenue sources, are we coupling that? Because I know on the very back of this, it's LAVTR funding. Are we coupling that? We kind of putting that in there as well as a possibility for that?
You want to talk about that? Why we called that out specifically?
Yeah, I think that certainly could fall into this category. Given, I think the attention on LAVTRF, that may be something that you want to address separately. I think it's really, and members of the delegation may have some feelings about that. I think that certainly could fall within that point here.
Okay, I think it definitely could fall within that. And also my opinion for my district, I think it could be on its own a priority. Because it's a tool that's there that we can't use. It's a mechanism that local governments have that we're not feeling the ability to use because the state refuses to fund it. So I think that's along with allowing other revenue sources, but also I think LAVTR should be of its own as it is already, but more of a priority on the list. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Senator Pittman.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On this funding thing, it's a very important thing, I think, for Wyandotte government. And I absolutely approve, I'm not approve, that's not my role, but I support, sorry. What happened in the legislature the last couple of years is on occasion, we have threatened to take away certain funding sources. Maybe it's the sales tax on food gone down from the state level and abolish the ability for the government to do that, or another of where we limit the amount. So I think this one's definitely distinct from the LAVTR, where for the public, the LAVTR is an existing fund that's been there since like the 60s or 30s. I don't remember how long it's been there, but we haven't been funding that for a good 20 years. I know I'm personally very supportive of making sure that we return that money to the city and the unified government, as well as to all of our counties. I don't know where the whole delegation stands on that. We don't have to take a poll on each of these, but I know I'm very supportive of that and would like to see us do that. There is an effort to eliminate that actually as well from certain people in leadership in the legislature. So that's something that we should all keep an eye on. And we might need to have unified government join forces with some of the other counties and local units of government to make statements and things around the LAVTR in particular. So just wanted to make that note to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Commissioner Davis has a question.
Not a question, just a statement. Thank you so much, Senator, for your support. I know for us, we've had a really tough budget sessions just dealing with our limited amount of revenue. And when we found out that at least on the books, what has been passed and what is state statute are these particular funds, but that they're not being funded and that they could help us balance the budget and pass property tax relief to citizens. That is something that it's not just a Wyandotte County thing. It is now becoming a statewide effort. I will also throw, along with LAVTR, the special highway fund, as well as any other funds that are on the books that the state is not funding or has not funded within that priority of, what is that, number 3. I think all of those can just be lumped in together. But thank you all for your efforts on this. And if you all need any help or testimony, I'd be more than happy to do so. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'd like to add to that as well. Just looking at the reality of partisanship in our state government, I've read some of the concerns of at least the Republican supermajority delegation, that the concern was that looking at this legislation, that a lot of the funds, I don't know how true it is, but there's a perception that the monies that municipalities were given were used for things other than tax relief. And some may have taken that and slush funded. And so even though the intent was tax relief, the concern that I've heard from some is that they're reluctant to reopen that conversation with that because of that dynamic that some municipalities may have. Now, I don't know how true that is, But when you're talking about working across the aisle, just maybe one thing that you all could consider is maybe legislation to be brought forward that really mandates municipalities to use the vast majority, 80–90% of those funds specifically just for tax relief. That might be something that our Republican delegate partners and friends might say, you know what, that's reasonable, and we can maybe move that needle forward with that type of conversation, because I know there is a movement against even entertaining the conversation of that legislation from the supermajority due to that concern that municipalities may use it for things that wasn't the intent of that legislation.
All right, we'll keep moving. Next one is expanded childcare and universal pre-K. This is carry forward from last year. And as it suggests, need for high quality childcare as an economic development need, as well as pre-K for supporting all children in Kansas. Discussion on that. Next, we have equalized motor vehicle taxes. This one was a new one last year. It's carried forward, and basically it's that the tax formula varies by county for property. Cars, as an example, if you own a Ford F-150 in Wyandotte County, you're going to pay a different tax on that than you would if you own that in Shawnee County or Butler County. So equalizing that tax across all counties as an issue of fairness.
Commissioner Ramirez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm gonna go out on a limb, and also with this, we could also add equalize the property tax formula as well for valuations. We've seen here, especially in Wyandotte County, valuations have skyrocketed, not only just in Wyandotte County, but across the state, of seeing how we can fix it and equalize it, make it more fair. Because, you know, we only control part of that discussion, and that's the rate, which we have not changed the rate, but valuations keep going up. And I know it's normal, it's natural for property to value and to go up, but how can we make it more fair, make it more equitable, slow that down so that with economic times, property tax the valuations go up as well in step with economic times.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm sorry, Senator Pittman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On that point of the valuations, I've seen it across all of Northeast Kansas. And it's a good thing because our economy is growing, our area is growing. Love that. But the downside of that is, of course, our property valuations are going up. Now, we got to remember that the valuation and the assessment formulas are in our state constitution. So when the legislature has to make a change to an assessment, it has to typically go into state constitution, which we would have to have a majority of both the House and the Senate, supermajority basically say, hey, we want to have a constitutional amendment that changes either the assessment value or what's on the table right now is some kind of cap year over year increases of like 4%. That's what was passed out of the Senate last year. So those are some of the options that are being considered to tampen down the aggressive assessment values. I want to put a shout out to our assessors out there who do a good job. It's not their fault that they're assessing at the property values that they have to. They're doing what they're told to do, and they're supposed to do what they do. And if they don't, it's kind of, it wouldn't be honest government. But it's an unfortunate situation wherein the system is churning up our property taxes. So I think we're all looking at that right now. I know a lot of the folks in this room have been in active discussions with our different House and Senate members. So thanks for that comment.
Thank you, Representative. Commissioner Markley.
Thanks, Mayor. I just want to make a comment on this sort of concept of capping the valuation. So my one concern with that is when I'm going to use the past example because it's easiest, we sort of peaked before we fell in 2008 and 2009, and that peak is what allowed us to survive the fall. So if we are now going to cut off the top of the peak, unless we're also going to put something on the bottom end that says we're not going to drop it more than 4% either, we're now not going to be able to survive the fall. So at some point, this real estate market is going to crash the same way it did then. We were up here, so that allowed that balance. If we only let ourselves get to here, but we still let the bottom fall out, how do we survive? So if we want to make it so we stay in the middle, I think that's fine. But we need to put a bottom on it as well as a top if we want to be able to survive the crashes that come after those peaks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Davis.
I'll add to that. I think, and I don't know if this has been a part of the conversation, but what I hear the most when it comes to property tax concerns, particularly those that are on a fixed income, which are typically, right, or seniors, and those that are on some sort of a disability, right? They are wage challenged, right? Because that's really what we're talking about. So a kind of meet in the middle, and I don't know what the discussion is or what the appetite is amongst their colleagues, but something for seniors could be that meet in the middle, right? With an inclusion of those that are on a fixed income. And I know other states have done something similar to that effect. It doesn't necessarily solve every problem, but it gets at those that are particularly wage challenged who may not be able to go out and get a job or an education or training to make more money to pay those expenses. Thank you, Mayor.
Senator Pittman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just say this, that I want to make sure everybody who's listening knows that there are some safe senior programs that will freeze property tax payments for seniors in particular that are on fixed income. So we want to make sure people go out and take advantage of that program. It's when the property tax goes up, the state comes in and pays the extra to keep it effectively frozen. So it's a nice program that we need to make sure a lot of the folks that you're talking about know about. And as regarding the drop, farmers right now have a very, very smooth up and a smooth down. It's 8 years of evaluations and it's projected over 8 more years. And I absolutely agree that we need to make sure that state governments, when there are disasters like a tornado or a super recession, that we need to have some mechanism to reevaluate, where we're at with county incomes. I think that has to be part of the discussion if we look at capping. So I really appreciate that. There's a lot of different caveats that come along with that. All types of things that maybe an improvement in a house, if it's more than $5,000 should get rid of the cap or things like that. So fully appreciate that.
All right. Next, we've got pay prevailing wage. This was carried forward from last year as well, which is prevailing wage on public works projects and economic development projects where tax incentives are given.
I'm sorry. Representative Curtis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We do have a bill that will do exactly what this says. It is House Bill 2348. A lot of the members actually on the House side of our delegation, I think, have co-sponsored that, and it would return local control for the purpose of paying prevailing wage. Our effort this year is going to be to try to get a hearing. That's the first step. Let's try to get a hearing on the bill so that we can start the discussion. We have a lot of new members that we simply do need to bring up to speed on what this is and that it really is a local control issue. So anyway, just want to let you know there is a bill currently sitting there that is alive, and we'll do the best we can to try to move it forward.
Thank you, Commissioner King.
Really, this only hurt 4 communities: Wyandotte County, Lawrence, Topeka, and Wichita. And it was a mean intention. It was to those of us that live in these areas that struggle, we're making the struggle more. And if you look at the projects that were built with prevailing wage, because what happens is, like the guys that work for us, they work right here local. And what they've been doing is they've been bringing contractors from Minnesota and Texas up, which puts our folks on the road. And Pam and this whole group has done a really good job with doing that. And we will be up there again. And, you know, we just said this, a couple of you said this a second ago. When we're up there, or when they're up there talking about that, it would be nice if one of the commissioners or some of us commissioners would go up and testify with them. You know, because they need our help to get it done. And we sure appreciate what you guys have done on that.
Next up, we've got increased funding for mental health and psychiatric beds. And this is in trying to meet the need for increased mental health funding and beds. I know the state has added some beds here over the last couple of years. And we see the need very clearly and acutely in Wyandotte County. And so that's where this request comes from. And it's also carried forward from last year. We got clean slate automated expungement carried forward from last year. And this is one that Representative Curtis has been working very hard on.
I'll give you just a quick update. The bill died last year. We have successfully been able to get it through the House Judiciary Committee easily, unanimously. So, but have not been able to get leadership to move it above the line and move it forward. Part of the barrier is perhaps on the Senate side, just in whether or not they would move it forward if the House were to pass it. So in lieu of not being able to get the automated expungement bill, which we know would help so many of our citizens to remove that barrier for employment and housing and education. Last year, since I was that was my first year on appropriations last year. And so I was very frustrated because I couldn't get that bill moved forward for several years now. So instead, I offered in appropriations to add $200,000 to the judicial branch budget so that they could contract with Kansas Legal Services and do additional expungement fairs statewide. So the $200,000 has allowed them to do quite a few more, 10 plus more expungement fairs. So I will have the results of those efforts this past summer and hopefully be able to request an additional amount next year so that we could continue, since we can't get clean slate, another way to help the same population by continuing to add money to do more expungement fairs. So that's my plan.
Thank you, Representative Commissioner Ramirez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So are we in essence, are we kind of putting the brakes on clean slate at the moment and trying to go the wraparound, you could say?
Mr. Mayor, yes. So I think that since I have been trying it for 4 years, it's time for somebody else to maybe pick up the torch and try it. So I think there is an effort. There are still some coalition members that are around. And so I fully expect to see a clean slate bill introduced perhaps by another member of the legislature.
And I know Representative Curtis mentioned, about the Senate. What is, leadership's opposition to a clean slate, or if they have any opposition to the clean slate bill, President Masterson or any of the leadership?
I'd say the judiciary chair had a lot on our plate and it wasn't one of her interests, and Senate president isn't necessarily all on board with automated expungements, as far as I could tell. If we approach this as a workforce development in a time when we have high need, I think that's a very positive message that the Commerce Committee and maybe some others will start listening up, that this is an untapped workforce that unfortunately gets penalized by having this on their record. And this is a way to help those returning citizens who paid their dues to come back in and work with a clean slate. So if we approach it like that, I think we're gonna have a better chance.
All right, next we've got funding for World Cup preparations. And this is a new one for this year. So 2026 is coming rapidly. There was money included last year kind of towards the end, but recognizing that there are significant potential costs for local government in hosting and preparing for that, we want to make sure that that is put forward to the delegation. Thanks. Moving to the next page here, we've got funding for unhoused. This is also a new one. And this is around the category of funding for permanent supportive housing and housing for youth that age out of foster care and emergency shelter. So currently, emergency shelter funds are being borne at the local level. The state has some activities trying to address the unhoused, but it's kind of in pieces and parts in different places. So we see that there's a larger role for the state to play in helping to coordinate and fund efforts to address this issue, across the state and including in Wyandotte County.
I'm just wondering, is there any current, like a committee or anybody studying any kind of ideas of how to approach the unhoused?
Representative Melton, there is. I attended the interim committee that was put together on that issue last week, and they've only met once, but there were no firm policy proposals that came out of that. But I think there have been some very positive discussions, at least.
Thank you, Commissioner Petty. Sorry, Senator Petty.
I've had different names different times. I do know that, and Paul's probably more aware of it. I do know that there's going to be an ask from Sedgwick County concerning this very issue when it comes to homelessness. Now what's included in here about youth that age out of foster care, that is actually, I think that's promising what may come about with funding for that particular category of youth, because that's been addressed on several different groups. And that's looked at as not as a very bipartisan issue. So I would say through the league, certainly stay in tune with what's happening in Sedgwick, because I do know that they're going to be asking for a substantial amount of money for this very thing.
Okay. Next, we have Protect Star Bonds. This is a carryover from last year's agenda. And as it suggests, it's protecting star bonds as an economic development tool. Next, we've got Quindaro Ruins. This is a new item, and this is in supporting efforts to restore Quindaro Ruins as a destination attraction.
I'd like to add to that. Our administrator is going to take the lead for this unified government to really take a deep dive into this issue and work with Gray Kendall at Wyandotte and some community stakeholders to hopefully at some point work with you all to get a robust proposal to our commission that hopefully not just the state of Kansas and Wyandotte County be proud of, but something worldwide that we could be proud of. I had been asked by several individuals, if I had my magic wand, what would I want? Well, I'd love to see a $1 billion star bond project that would link the Quindaro Ruins to the Rock Island Bridge and as two anchoring economic development tourist destinations, and everything in between that redevelop and totally transform everything from the Northeast to downtown to Armourdale in a way unlike no one's seen probably in this country. And I think it can be done. When you look at a lot of bipartisan support right now, there's a window of opportunity that's there at the federal level, both both Republicans and Democrats are waiting on Wyandotte County, as well as delegates across the water in Missouri, particularly Emmanuel Cleaver. I talk to constantly, every time I see him, he's asking me, what is Wyandotte County doing with Quindaro? He views it as a gold mine of opportunity that he doesn't want to see slip away. I know that Representative LaTurner and as well as Davids are all on board. I've had conversations with the governor, the lieutenant governor, as well as private individuals that like to invest in seeing something really unique and historic as far as what can be done in relation to really taking a hard look at Quindaro ruins and what that could provide to the state of Kansas. And so just sharing that vision with you and letting you know that a lot of folks are already there on board and that the unified government is working to develop a plan of action under the leadership of our new administrator. And so for those that may be watching, all I can say is stay tuned because there's so much interest out there and not just here locally, but nationally. I've gone to DC and I was shocked at how many people actually knew about the Quindaro ruins and asked me, was there any movement on that? And so for this delegation, I just wanted to share that with you and really just reiterate the support, hopefully that can be cultivated through your leadership throughout the halls of the state legislature to really support an initiative that we all see Wyandotte County as being the gateway to Kansas. If you come across the Lewis and Clark Viaduct, that really could transform things east of 635 in a way that I think would be monumental when you talk about revitalization of an area that has been disinvested for so long. Thank you, Commissioner. I'm sorry, Senator Petty.
I'm going to keep that title for a while. I think it would be paramount to this effort, since there are new dollars that have come to the UG dealing with the Quindaro ruins, to help keep us informed as to how those dollars are being used in the next year here. Before, it's been always looking for dollars. Now that there are some dollars there, that definitely it's in some ways maybe seed money, but at least there is. So it certainly will help me, and I suspect the rest of the delegation to be kept informed as to how that's being used.
Thank you, Senator. Administrator.
Appreciate those comments, Senator. I think we were very appreciative of receiving funds that directly talked about Quindaro ruins. One of those things that we will be doing is a master plan. What we've heard from the state and federal delegation, federal offices, the governor's office is, what would this investment be? You need to show us something. And so we've got that message loud and clear, and that's what you'll see us working on over the next year. So we can maybe sit around this table next year and say to you, well, here's the master plan. Here's the vision of Quindaro ruins. And we've been talking with our federal and now our state delegation again. So thank you for that encouragement.
Thank you, Administrator. I don't want to get lost. To me, it is significant that the Quindaro ruins is the catalyst, but I think for Wyandotte County, it's so much more than that, because when you talk about the potential to redevelop our entire riverfront from like other communities have done, wrapping around from the ruins to the Rock Island Bridge, and then all the ancillary development that can happen in between those two tourist destinations, I think it could be monumental for Wyandotte County and provide the added tax base, resources, tourism, entertainment, and all those amenities that a lot of our residents have said that they wanted, and put Wyandotte County on a map that would be unique here in the heartland in a way that other cities wouldn't have, especially when you talk about the abolitionists, the American Indians, and freed African-American slaves that really brought slaves over. I know talking to Congressman Cleaver, some have asked me, well, what's his interest? His interest is he'd like to see a bi-state initiative. And that's maybe something that the Kansas delegation could talk about with the Missouri partners across the water, because he mentioned it to me that the slaves had to come from somewhere and they had to come from Missouri seeking freedom. And there's artifacts and there's points of interest there that could really broaden a centralized bi-state historic destination, not just for the nation, but for the world to come and learn about those individuals that really were seeking freedom. So thank you.
All right. Actually, along that line, I'm going to jump to the number 15 of the study committee on the creation of a riverfront authority. It's kind of in that same vein here, which is, what could that look like? And so this one is carried forward from last year as well. Moving back up one, this increased state community college funding, again, carried forward from last year. And this is a recognition that community colleges are almost entirely funded at the local level. And that has a significant property tax burden for residents here, almost on par with our K through 12 education funding stream. So, but it's serving people in a greater region. So having a more equitable or more state funding would relieve that property tax burden and make that a more fair investment. All right, alternative construction delivery. This is a carry forward from last year as well. And this is around reducing the thresholds to allow for that design, build, construction manager at risk technique.
Thank you, Commissioner Ramirez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This one is important. I'm sure we have other projects, but the number one project I can think of where we used this is the Turner Diagonal. And that was a project, a huge project that I believe it was design build, and it was built quicker than had been expected when it was on way ahead schedule than what was going to be built. So it works. And so if we can find ways to make the statutes and make the law work better with us to be able to do the projects that we need, I think it'd be very beneficial for Wyandotte County.
Okay. Next, we've got felony assault on public transit employees. This is also carried forward from last year, and this would increase the penalty to provide more protection for transit operators.
Mayor, I can give a quick update on that. I tried to offer an amendment last year that would have added that protection for bus drivers. It failed, but I had several legislators come up to me afterwards, and they were very interested in trying to do that this coming session. Last session, we had several other, categories that also wanted to have that protection. So in our research, we did find that in Missouri, they actually have adopted language that is more of like a catch-all language. So that it catches a lot of those critical positions where you do see assaults on employees. Like we passed last year, the protections for those in medical settings. So definitely I know firsthand from being at the KCATA what our bus drivers have to endure a lot of times. And so having that protection in place would be good. So I think this year we'll be looking at what Missouri did with that catch-all language and see if we can't introduce some legislation that then would address that.
Thank you, Representative Senator Pittman.
I'll add, I'm fully supportive of our transit folks. I've had similar requests from teachers who are going through some hard times in schools. I'm a little hesitant to introduce felonies just for the reasons we talked about. I mean, stiffening some of our penalties out there, maybe even having it as a repeat, but sometimes we ratchet up our felony laws pretty quickly in the state because we want to be tough on crime and get elected out there. And then it never goes back down. So we have a lot of felony situations, and I get hesitant when we start throwing the word felony around. And we have to be very careful that when we say felony assault on is it just because when assault's not a very large bar and it's just because of the position, we start creating protected classes. We just have to be conscious of the impact of introducing this and some of the unanticipated consequences that can happen from these. Thank you.
And Mayor, Senator Pittman, I think it was misdemeanor, right? For the healthcare, the protection. It wasn't
We didn't get it-
felony.
Didn't get to the level that. the
Yeah,
health-
felony. And I think that same concern has been expressed kind of universally about increasing it to the felony level. And so, yes, the conversation that we have had around the transit drivers has been more to add the protection as misdemeanors, not as a felony.
Commissioner Ramirez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We may not have this data tonight, but if we can get the data from KCATA, are those transit drivers and operators that work, when they're assaulted, are the assaults from, yes, I'm new writers, but do any of the writers have mental health issues? They're going through a mental health episode at the time. And that would be my only stop to that is if they're already going through a mental health episode and we're wanting to slap them with a felony assault, and then that just furthers the cycle of recidivism with our mental health population. And so that's my only reservation on this is if a majority of them are due to mental health episodes, then I don't think slapping a felony assault is gonna, like, yes, I support our public transit drivers and operators, but I don't see how it gonna reduce the amount of assaults that are currently happening.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Bynum.
I would support, some measure that maybe doesn't reach the felony level, but to Commissioner Ramirez's point, probably 9.5 out of 10 engaged in that behavior has a mental health issue. But criminal behavior is criminal behavior. So people need to be held accountable for their behavior, especially if it's criminal behavior. And I think, if something like this were on the books, it's another tool in the toolbox for what not only UG Transit, but KCATA Transit operators are dealing with, just my opinion.
Next one, medical cannabis.
Before we go to that, it's kind of left. Did this commission want to keep that as a legislative priority? I kind of got mixed.
We could also adjust the language.
We can. I just was trying to get a consensus.
I agree with Commissioner Bynum of some shape or form. I don't think felony assault should be the top. Just something. I don't know where that could go.
Thank you.
All right, next is everyone's favorite topic. We got medical cannabis. This was included in the agenda from last year. The Commission had a discussion around that, and this is where they landed in terms of medical cannabis. So is that any discussion on that?
I did have one. And I believe I've talked to our entire delegation about it. It's legal in Colorado, Missouri, and I believe in some form in Oklahoma. I'm here top north of us in Nebraska as well. So we're sandwiched between states where it's legal. People can literally walk across the street, depending on where you are in Wyandotte County, and go to a dispensary and legally possess, smoke marijuana. And some may not know fully, and I'm not saying ignorance of the law and all that. I mean, the reality is that society, when you look at some of the states that have legalized marijuana, society, it's becoming more and more an acceptable venue or recreational form of just like alcohol. Especially when you look at prohibition, I mean, alcohol was outlawed and then became acceptable. I think the social values of our country are shifting based on this new generation, and it's becoming an acceptable form of usage is for personal use. I say that to say I understand in the state of Kansas that that it is still illegal. The one issue that I've mentioned that I really would hope that our Wyandotte County Edition would really push something forward is after 3 convictions, it's a felony. And that could have serious implications on individuals that are found to be in possession. Now, it depends on where you go. I mean, there's some counties where the DA may not file, and there's some that may take a harder line on individuals found to be in possession of marijuana. And I think to just make it more uniform, especially because Wyandotte County is in such close proximity to an area where it is legalized. And you know, I can tell you, I've been to a lot of parks, I've been to a lot of social events, and it's hard for me to find an event anymore where you don't know who's smoking it, but you know somebody has smoked it. You know, go to your grocery store, your Walmart, go to any type of big major venue. It's like the Great Smokeout. I'm just being, that's the reality. You know, people are smoking and they're doing it. And so when you talk about having a felony on your record and what that does to a lot of things, everything from employment to getting services that you would be afforded otherwise, I think that is a huge drawback for our Kansas residents. So at least removing the felony part of it and taking it down to maybe a high level misdemeanor. I think hopefully that our supermajority friends could see as a compromise, because I know that some do struggle with legalizing marijuana, but at least have the conversation about maybe removing that harsh penalty of a felony. Commissioner Davis.
I think this is either my second or third time. I'm for full recreational use. I know that I may not be in the majority here, but the economic impact is just undeniable. It's just undeniable. The educational impact of it. I mean, right now, I'm just thinking of millennials and Gen Z, where I'm seeing friends of mine that are getting their education here and then going to Missouri to start businesses that are within the marijuana industry of some sort. And so I know that is probably further along and probably far more progressive, but there is a lot of impact in full recreational use. We regulate alcohol, we regulate cigarettes, we regulate other things that it can be regulated the same way, as well as completely alleviate the criminal justice conversation, right? And so I just wanted to be on record for that. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Ramirez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, I support what Commissioner Davis said, but we all know our state. We got to take it step by step. We may not get the full thing we want, but let's get some quarter, some halfway there. And I think the medical marijuana is or cannabis is that first step where we can get. And I support what the mayor mentioned about the 3 strikes law. That is something that he and I have talked about in length before, talking about this and talking about what we can do at the local level. And so I would support changing the 3 strikes law in some way where it's not so detrimental it's not so detrimental. Because we know here in Wyandotte County that it's our minority are the ones who are going to feel it the most. And so if we can reduce that in any way, I think that would be really good and beneficial for the minority and the minority youth in our community.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner King.
I gotta agree with Commissioner Davis. Let's go for all of it. You know, we are losing so much money. And I mean, hey, yeah, this is kind of odd because, and I'd imagine some of you have smoked pot in this room. But here's the deal. And when both my parents died a very long, slow death, and it would have been nice to give them some gummies to ease the pain, and I was up there this year when the highway patrol got up, and that guy was full of shit. All he kept talking about was what he saw in life. Well, and a couple of you guys are former police officers. You get in your box, and this is the way you think. Sometimes you have to step outside your box to say, you know what, this is good for the people. And even though it's good for the people, it's beneficial for the state.
Thank you.
Mayor, I might just add, just for members of the commission and the public that's tuning in, lack of progress on this issue is not because this delegation and others have not been trying very hard. This is an issue that if you would put it to a vote on the floor, both the House and the Senate, it would pass. And there's no doubt about it. There's a leadership impediment that is preventing that from happening. So I just want folks to know that the legislature has spent a lot of time on this issue, and there's been interim studies, there's been a lot of discussion, and I think they've fine-tuned a lot of these proposals. But until a certain legislative leader decides he's going to change his position on this, that's the impediment right now.
I'd like to, before you start, in the interest of time, we do have a second half of this. We need to engage with our delegation. So just if we can just run through these, and then I just encourage our commissioners and our delegation to have these kind of conversations after, unless it's something really, really critical.
All right, the next one, tuberculosis outbreak management. This is a new one, and this came about because we have had tuberculosis outbreaks, and the challenge is that the state provides a little bit of funding for that, but not a lot of funding and not enough to cover the management of that, particularly when you start talking about testing lots of people in an outbreak situation or multiple rounds of medicine that is required to manage those outbreaks. So this is seeking, it's an appropriation item seeking additional funds to support local public health in managing tuberculosis outbreaks. And the next one, expanded treatment and harm reduction approaches for substance abuse. This is carried forward from last year with the caveat that fentanyl test strips were legalized in the last session, so that has come out of this. Otherwise, it is carried forward from last year, which is seeking additional funding for substance abuse treatment. We don't have any inpatient substance abuse treatment beds in Wyandotte County right now, and there is a significant lag in terms of people that are seeking treatment that are not able to access it, that are maybe sitting in the county jail and in other places. So there's a human element, and then there's a significant cost element to this as well. Support services for at-risk youth. This actually has the foster care support after age 18 in it as well, and expanding the child in need of care support services for at-risk youth. This is part public health and also part public safety on that one. Allow expedited partner therapy. This is one that's carried forward that you all have seen before, which is to allow partners who are exposed to sexually transmitted diseases to automatically get those prescription treatments without necessarily having to go through the full diagnosis regimen. So that's that one. The next one is the Protect Supplemental Nutrition Assurance Assistance Program, or SNAP. And this is recognition that there are close to 20 or over 20,000 people in Wyandotte County that receive SNAP benefits. And so, any efforts to make that harder to access can have a direct detrimental impact to the ability of residents to access those SNAP benefits and the food that they provide. The next one, we got the Extreme Risk Protection Order. This is one the red flag law that would, under certain circumstances, allow for firearms to be removed from a person who poses a danger to themselves or others. Next, we've got offender reintegration, again pulled forward from last year. This is full funding for community corrections programs that provide support to allow people to successfully reintegrate into the community. We have heard from our community corrections department just in the last month or two about the success they've had in reducing recidivism. So that we know that it can be done, and this is seeking that full funding to support those efforts. Next, LABTR funding. This is a new item, as we just talked about earlier. This is the funding specifically around LABTR to support, to provide additional funding to local government. On that one. All right. And then last, the local share of sports betting revenue. This is carried forward from last year. It was a priority issue last year. But Paul, I don't know if you want to speak to this one.
I think that many of you may be aware that when the sports wagering law was passed, there was no local component as there is for regular gaming funds. There was also a fund that was set up to potentially lure professional sports teams to Kansas. This fund does not have a great deal of money in it, and probably is unlikely to be utilized. But if the legislature reviews that, there may be an opportunity to review the local share as well. But as many of you know, the Pandora's box of gaming legislation doesn't like to be opened in Topeka, and so I think the reason we kind of downgraded this from the priority that it was last year's is that there doesn't seem to be much appetite to revisit gaming.
Thank you, Senator Petty. Senator Petty.
Too bad there's two P's right next to each other. It's getting confusing. I would hope that as you're looking to finalize your recommendations, that you would look at putting the LABTR funding as under the priority list instead of where it's at. And then also, I actually have visited with the health department, the Wyandotte County Health Department, in the last month. The number 22 allow expedited partner therapy. As my colleagues may note, we're one of only 4 states which do not allow expedited therapy therapy for partner therapy. It's with the health department, as they spoke to me, it's really a number one issue is from a health perspective in our community. So I would really encourage all of us to think about that seriously. We had a informational hearing in Senate Public Health and Welfare at least 3 years ago. I'm not going to say that I swayed my chair, but I certainly am going to work to make this, to help educate legislators. And I would encourage you to learn more about it because it's really can have an impact on the health of our families in Wyandotte County.
Thank you, Senator Piven.
If I could make one comment about the expedited partner therapy issue, just so you all are aware, actually tomorrow morning, I'm going to be on another call with folks from the health department here and health departments all across the state that have organized themselves really, and our health department here has had a pretty big role in that. Representative Epley, as you may recall, has kind of been the champion on the House side of this. This bill has passed the House before, and I think he is looking for some indications that there is some appetite in the Senate, and particularly the Public Health Committee, and so I know that that may or may not exist, but appreciate your efforts and certainly appreciate the weight that you carry on that committee, which is not easy.
So, Mr. Mayor, thank you for that recognition. I would encourage the commission to think about education and supporting your local education boards. This county has taken the lead in terms of making sure we have fair and equitable funding, and that's constantly, that formula that's been put in place has been attacked in terms of attacking the at-risk funding and these other things in terms of taking that away. That this funding really does benefit, funding mechanisms really do benefit our citizens here in Wyandotte County. So I'd encourage you to say, you know, we want to keep the funding formula clean as is and this type of thing. It's really good for us here locally. Second thing is we have a couple of passionate people about the Central Bridge as well as Highway 5 up through to Leavenworth. Might be more specific instead of that number 3, protect state infrastructure funding, to maybe specify which infrastructure roads we might want to focus on when we attract funds from the state with matching funds from the city or from the unified government, and maybe just call those out each year so that we know what we should be pushing for and really pushing in with the Department of Transportation and Administration. My third point and final point would be just something around, we have a nice array of very specific health outcome initiatives from the Public Health Department. One of the disturbing trends that was brought to my attention last year was the health outcomes of this particular county are some of the worst in the state. And I love that we have very specific initiatives to address that, but I would encourage the unified government to maybe even make a statement that says, hey, we need to have the states, just in general, have the states focus on helping us come up with better, you know, raise our ranking in the state from the bottom county up to one of the top, you know, at least in the middle. That one position would even be better. So something along those lines, because the health of our individuals, it affects our workforce, it affects our education, it affects our families and quality of life and all those things. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right. I'm sorry. You're fine, Mr. Representative Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just want to echo what Senator Pittman said. Since this was my first session, I did reach out to KHI and Topeka, and we have been on a decline in the health area with all their, we're 104 out of 105. And the only reason we're not 105 is because one county didn't submit their information and their data. So we probably would have been 105. So we've been on a decline for the last 5 years as a county as a whole from the state's perspective. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all so much. It's a great discussion. I'd like to just personally thank on behalf of the unified government, our Wyandotte County legislative delegation for coming here, spending your time with us, hearing our concerns and issues. The partnership we have is strong, and I believe these types of conversations just help that partnership and our shared vision get even stronger as we try and get the resources that we know are needed here in Wyandotte County. So thank you for your support. You know that you have our support. And if there's no other business, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Okay, there's a motion. I have a second. There's a motion and a second. Clerk, roll call.
Roll call. Bynum.
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye.
Ramirez.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Kane. Markley.
Aye.
Stites.
Aye.
Davis.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. We're adjourned. We will re-adjourn at 7 o'clock for our full commission meeting in the chambers. Thank you so much.